Hello, you radical human. Today, I talked to Kate Pope, also known as the Wild Nutritionist. This conversation is really fascinating, close to my heart right now because it's very prevalent in my life in terms of how we are choosing to feed our 8-month-old son. And Kate has some very interesting insights as to why some of the more sexy, modern, new styles of feeding might not actually be setting your family up for the best success. Things like baby-led weaning might not have it all right. This idea that 100 foods before one might actually be harming the gut instead of healing it. Why we shouldn't rush to feed solids. Why we should think about meat stocks. Why we should think about nutrient density, organs, beef, and why vegetables might not be the best first foods for your child, and the importance of the microbiome, how really it all comes back to gut health, and the principles that she espouses in this episode will set not only your children up, but you for health and vibrancy, vitality for the long haul. So let's dive into the show with the Wild Nutritionist. Kate, welcome to the show. A 3-month baby that I just got to meet before we went live, and my wife will be fangirling at this one because we've been feeding our 8-month-old baby as per your protocols and everything that you share through your Instagram, the Wild Nutritionist. So that's exactly what we're going to be diving into today. Super excited for this conversation. I think your insight is really cool and accessible and profound. So thank you for being on the show. And how is new mom life treating you?
Thank you. New mom life is wonderful. I had an amazing postpartum, even better than my first postpartum. This is my first interview since having my second baby, and I was able to put so much into place because of what I know about what a mom needs to heal from birth and to bond with baby in that precious fourth trimester. And I just feel so vital and supported because I allowed myself the proper rest after birth. And so it was no struggle when I started to go out into the world again. My nervous system was very regulated, very engaged in the social nervous system with my new baby, and I'm feeling really, really good.
That's amazing. I love to hear it. Love to hear it. You have a really interesting take on how to feed babies that is a little bit counter to some of the more conventional or trendy narratives. And it kind of grounds itself from this GAPS method, if I'm correct. Would you give us the backstory on what GAPS actually is and how you kind of stumbled into this? Was this part of your own healing journey, etc.? And kind of bring us up to speed on where we're at now.
Absolutely. So, GAPS, for those of you who don't know, it's an acronym and it stands for Gut and Psychology Syndrome or Gut and Physiology Syndrome. And it's a protocol created by Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride. And I went to nutritional therapy school in 2018, and I had a really great time learning foundational functional nutrition. Taught me about physiology and biochemistry and how nutrients work in the body. And I had heard about GAPS through that program. And when everything was going mad with COVID, I really wanted to know what Dr. Natasha was up to. I was like, what does she have to say about all this? And so I listened to a masterclass that she taught, and it just so happened that the GAPS training was starting the next week and there were 2 spots left. So I went and got my GAPS certification and became a GAPS practitioner. And in that course, I learned how important it is to prepare your body for pregnancy. Dr. Natasha says, like, you can't just willy-nilly have a baby anymore. That's a quote. You really need to prepare the body. And that's because we have so much intergenerational toxic load. We have an intergenerational nutritional deficiencies, and we have a polluted world. And so if you want to have a healthy baby, got to build up your nutrient stores, clear some toxins. And along with that comes like mental, physical, emotional healing, which is really important and just kind of convenient before you have a kid. So I did that with my husband, and we had a baby like 18 months later. And I had a cesarean. And so it was kind of like double healing my gut. I had to go back and do a lot of the work again, which really brought me to the precipice of when my son was going to start solid foods. And I knew I couldn't just start giving him whatever, even really healthy foods. I couldn't just start dishing this out to him. I really wanted to use a methodical way that would build his gut. And because people have damaged guts, not only from cesareans, this really resonated with a lot of moms. I started speaking out about this because if you have ended up in the hospital for your birth and they don't have much support for you going home, they're just going to send you home with some laxatives and say good luck. And there's really a lot that we can do to repair our bodies. So I really wanted to share that message with moms and help babies heal.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I'd love to dive into some of the nuances that you learned about how birth can actually affect the gut microbiome of children. Like my firstborn was a C-section baby too, and then most recently an at-home free birth. And I know that's a profound difference. The sterility of the hospital environment versus the bacteria in the vaginal canal and everything that comes with that. What are some of the most profound things you learned about that, how it actually affects the baby and how it might play out in the long run in terms of the health implications?
Yeah, so when babies are born through the vaginal canal, they first of all get to do all of their natural movements that they're meant to do when they're born. So there's like a nervous system component to being born through the birth canal, which is really, really important. And this has a huge imprint on babies and our start to life. And there's also the microbial component. So when babies are born through the vaginal canal, they get a large dose of lactobacillus and bifidobacterium. And both of these bacteria are extremely important for populating the infant gut. And when they don't have that route through the canal, there's basically a blank space for other microbes to come in, not to mention what the baby is enduring through the cesarean, through being lifted out of the womb in a different way. And all of the drugs that the mom received and antibiotics in most cases are also going to the baby. So for me, I was very fortunate to be able to breastfeed my baby right away, despite the cesarean, which absolutely contributes to the inoculation of the gut. And breast milk is so healing and so beautiful and just amazing for babies, right? And there's a burden now on my son because of the way that he was born. And I just want to help him as much as possible, support him in all the ways that I know how, so that he can adapt fully and, live his life healthily without developing a chronic disease, which is very much correlated to cesarean babies.
And I was born personally via C-section too, and I consider myself a pretty healthy and robust human now. So it's not like this is a death sentence, so to speak, for your immunity and your gut health. It just kind of you have to be aware of some of the challenges that you might face in the future and some of the ways to rehabilitate. And I guess that's a really nice segue into thinking about, well, how do we introduce foods and what is the optimal path here? And what I mentioned, something being quite trendy, baby-led weaning and such like that, and this idea that we should try and get like 100 foods under one and all this crazy. We kind of got suckered into that with our firstborn too. So, like, take me on that journey a little bit. What do you think some of the more new age kind of feeding methodologies might get wrong? What does baby-led weaning potentially get wrong or misunderstand about childhood nutrition?
Yeah, so the main thing about 100 foods before one, letting baby choose all their foods, like putting out, banana, carrots, and apples, so say, because that's really what's mostly pushed is fruits and vegetables for our children. I like to call this microbiome led weaning. So, really, what's making the decisions here is those microbes. Okay, so if the microbiome is ruled by yeast and the microbiome ruled by yeast tries banana, then banana is quickly going to become the favorite food, and this can become to the point where baby refuses any other food. Maybe baby just likes banana, a little bit of rice, and some apple or carrots, right? And they're really refusing other foods. Well, in my worldview, it's not the baby so much that's refusing the foods, it's the microbes. And the microbiome wants to be continually fed by those sugary, starchy foods. So I like to say baby led weaning can be an appropriate choice for a baby, but first, let's build the gut so that digestion is optimal, and then offer choices which are ancestral. So, ancestral foods for a baby would be something like liver, bone marrow, ground beef, meat stock, which is the food that I teach first for babies. So, my son eventually, once he was developmentally ready and he was showing signs he wanted to pick up his food and eat it, he had an array of choices, but they were all foods that someone could hunt and kill pretty much and eat nose to tail. So that's how I help parents, connect the dots between something that might have happened, like with the cesarean birth. It's just a way to connect the dots as to why your baby might be expressing a symptom. It's in no way like this thing that you can never get out of. It's not a disease, but it's something that helps us to understand, and even understand generationally, right? Because we're inheriting a microbiome. So you inherited a microbiome from your mother, but you were gypped basically because you didn't get to make it all the way through the canal. And now you're passing your microbes to your son, and the majority of his microbes he's getting from his mother, but he's getting that degradation from a cesarean birth. So let's say like I was born vaginally, but my mom took rounds and rounds of antibiotics. She took less antibiotics than her mother took. So we're seeing this intergenerational degradation of the microbiome, which is why when it comes to starting solids, we want to support microbiome health, digestion, as these are the foundations and key to brain, immune, and overall health.
Love it. Yeah, what a fascinating reframe. I love that kind of microbiome-led weaning idea. But it raises an interesting point for people that are maybe newer to this conversation. Our culture just absolutely loves to celebrate vegetables as the panacea of health. And it seems that, we're told to try and get our kids eating vegetables as soon as humanly possible. Whereas you just said some of the best foods that you might go for are something like meat stocks or liver or ground beef. So it's interesting, right? Why do you think those are the best foods, or maybe come at it from why you don't think vegetables might be the best first foods, and what's going on nutritionally there?
Totally. So it comes back to functional nutrition. Humans are designed to digest animal fats and proteins. We have a stomach at the top of our digestive cascade, which is full of acid. And this is perfect for breaking down animal foods, animal fats, animal proteins. And these are also the building blocks for our brain. This is where our most bioavailable fat comes from. Even those micronutrients that are talked about, like eat your colorful vegetables to get your vitamin C, we actually can get vitamin C from animal foods, from liver. And I also teach how to ferment these foods, which make them more digestible. So why a baby wouldn't just start on plant foods? The main reason is we want to think about digestibility. So how can this baby break down that food? It's not going to be the easiest food for a baby to digest. It's not going to mimic breast milk either. The animal proteins and animal fats that come from beautiful pasture-raised animals, that is the closest to the composition of our breast milk. And so when we go into this transition with solid foods, we want to ease that transition and slowly help their digestive system adapt, rather than like shocking them with a starch, a sugar, or a plant protein that they can't break down.
Is there a recommended-ish timeline for when this all starts to unfold? Like you said, you don't want to just rush to give in all of these solids, and you prioritize, and I really am interested in this broth versus stock kind of idea that you have. But what's the typical timeline on this? It seems like everybody's in a rush these days to hit milestones ahead of time and such. Like, how do you see it playing out?
Yeah, that is, even just you saying that is like such a relief in my body, because I always want to emphasize to moms, like, we don't have to go fast. You don't have to have a chart with 100 foods for one before one. My saying for that is, let's go for 100 trillion microbes before one, which is easily comes in, a couple servings of sauerkraut juice. That microbial diversity is going to help your child be a diverse eater for their entire life. So in terms of the timeline for starting solids, this varies. I personally find that the sweet spot is around 6 months for a breastfed baby, exclusively breastfed baby, around 6 months. It can come a little sooner if the mom is feeling really fatigued and she's needing some help, right? She's nursing and she's really tired and she needs her baby to rely on some nutrition from another source. Now, the foods that I teach to start with are not fake filler foods that are just to like keep your baby full. No, this is a very simple to digest, gentle meat stock that you offer to baby. You can stay on just meat stock for several weeks. And some people, based on their symptoms, have to stay on meat stock only for almost a year. For formula fed babies, for babies that are on formula their whole life, or even combo fed, I recommend starting solids a little sooner. And the main reason for that is because you can then get off the formula faster. And the formula, while it really helped you out and you needed it for whatever reason, it's a processed food. So we want to wean them off of that formula as quickly as possible. And nutrient density from, animal proteins and fats are going to help you do that.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. And this emphasis on nutrient density is something that, I mean, we try and preach to our audience all the time. Really think about nutrients. And just so happens to be that some of the most nutrient dense foods on the planet come from this like animal based paradigm. Our proteins, our fats, our organs are so nutrient dense. And I love seeing that. And this it's exactly our trajectory with our latest born son. Is he's been on these meat stocks now, and he's just loving them and sucking them up, and now we're introducing more and more stuff, but it's been a lot more gentle and slow, and it seems more intuitive, and he's healthy and he's happy and he's having no issues right now, which I can't say was necessarily the case for our firstborn, as we were just doing, something that just maybe didn't jive as much with his microbiome early on. And again, when you know better, you can do better. But like I said, I am very interested in this broth versus stock kind of juxtaposition that you have. Why meat stock and why not bone broth?
Totally. So both are good foods. When it comes to a baby or someone who has a sensitive gut, we really want to start with meat stock. And the main difference between meat stock and bone broth is that meat stock is cooked for less time. And we always start with a raw piece of meat, and it has to have a joint in it. So think about when you're making meat stock, it's like 80% meat, 20% bone, whereas bone broth a lot of times is just like those white bones with not a lot of meat on them. And oftentimes people are making bone broth from like leftover carcasses. That's not going to be as nutrient dense as a meat stock, which is cooked from a raw piece of meat or bone. And these are pieces like feet, neck, shank. All of these pieces have collagen, and the collagen creates a gelatin-rich stock, which continues to build the digestive system and helps baby to ingest and digest other foods. So it's a really like foundational piece of the puzzle. Bone broth, its cousin, it's a part of a regenerative kitchen. And when you're a mom who has a healthy gut, you have no symptoms, you're a healthy woman rocking around, you can have your bone broth, and that's going to be fine and good for you. But when you're starting your baby on solids, you want to give them just this really simple to digest food. And that's where I suggest meat stock. It's actually easier to make. It's more delicious and it's more nutrient dense. So we're rarely drinking bone broth in our family. We're mostly drinking meat stock. They look really similar, but the distinctions are important for gut health.
Yeah, very cool. So meat stock, and then you mentioned things like liver and organs. Do you ever get concerns, I guess, over things like, raw meat or feeding a baby meat too early or high levels of vitamins in liver as opposed to plants? And if so, how do you just kind of counteract that with some good grounded understanding of what's really going on?
Yeah, so I don't fear animal products at all. I don't ever fear raw meat. I don't ever think I'm giving the baby meat too early, because when I look at the research and look at the ancestral practices around the world, thriving communities, there actually still are healthy people out there in the world who never had to like reclaim their health or go in a protocol to get healthy again. They've just been healthy from birth, and they've been healthy generationally. And when we look at what those people are eating, it's primarily animal proteins and fats. So I'm never afraid of that. And ancestrally, we can see how people have relied on these foods for health for many, many generations. Now, when it comes to something like vitamin A, which is often talked about, people are like vitamin A toxicity, mineral imbalances. I would say for a baby, the amount that you would want to give them of liver daily would be like the size of their palm. And I would do that for a mom too. So like a mom, a dad, and a baby, they can all eat liver the size of their palm daily. Beyond that, you probably don't want to go overboard. Now, what I also see is that babies self-select. So this is where that baby-led weaning idea comes in. We've laid the foundation, we've supported their microbiome health, and we're offering ancestral foods. Then they can decide what their upper limit is, really. For our family, when it comes to liver, the way that we usually do it is we'll eat it for like 2 weeks straight, and we'll be like liver, 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 and we're just loving it. And then we like kind of forget about it. And then I'm like, oh, cool, we forgot about eating liver. And then we remember. And so that's just the way that our body like self-regulates, and our babies can do that too. A big part of what I teach is teaching mothers to reclaim their own sense and intuition. And with that comes power, and our babies trusting their bodies too, because they really do know what they need.
I love that. I think that's a really empowering frame, and that kind of reflection back to the mom, like your mama gut knows if you really listen to it and you don't, combine with all of the gaslighting and just the this is how everything should be. It's hard. It's hard because there's so many conflicting opinions and there's so much meddling from outside sources. So as we slightly shift focus here to the mom as well, because you focus so much on the babies and the children's nutrition. What are some good practices for mom too? Even potentially, like you said, maybe she's having a hard time breastfeeding. What are some of the things that she can really do to increase optimal supply and anything that you think really stands out there? And also just generally, seeing as you're in this, 3 months postpartum, what are some of the important things for you to really think about so that you can show up and actually, feel like a human in the process of these, early days?
Yeah. I mean, I can't really overemphasize the importance of food and nourishment for moms and rest. Those are for the universal five postpartum needs. Rest and nourishment through food are the first two. They're very, very important. And so when a mom comes to me and she's really struggling, she's tired, she's exhausted, she has grief from her birth or whatever the outcome was, I always start with meat stock for moms too. And I always say that moms and babies can heal together. This was certainly the case with my son. It was very much in the spirit of us both getting through something that was really, really difficult. And having the, new motherhood is, it can be difficult. And having that foundation of nourishing foods as the backbone is so valuable. So I always say, like, yeah, mothering can be hard. Mothering with dysregulated blood sugar, way worse, right? We don't want to feel hangry. We don't want to feel like we don't have energy. We don't have that, like spirit of love to lift us up. And I think that when we have a healthy microbiome and when we're getting actually enough in quantity of food, we can just feel so much better. So, like, let's just be really real here and break it down. You got to have protein for breakfast. You need to have multiple eggs. Two is not enough. You need to have some soup with your breakfast and probably some carbohydrates. So, like squash, or whether that's like some sauteed, green beans if you love those, or some fruit. All of those things are going to help you to have enough energy to nurse your baby and to actually rest, because we need nutrients to rest too. There's more I could say about that, which is that our nervous system really needs social input in the fourth trimester. It's extremely important to have the company of wise women. It's extremely important to have other adults around you. Just like we wouldn't leave a new baby alone, we also shouldn't leave a new mother alone. She really needs that input from wise people around her, holding her, keeping her warm, loving on her, bringing her food. And this supports the flow of oxytocin, which supports the release of breast milk. And it's a really beautiful exchange between mother and baby, because mother feels supported by her community, her partner, and any other wise women in her community. And that way she's able to take care of her baby. And when her baby is well, she is well. So it's like this reciprocal thing that is really lost. And I think food is a huge piece of this, just because there's like literal physical building blocks that we need. And also there's that community piece, which is so important for the health of the baby and the health of the mother.
Mhm. That's so important. I'm so glad you mentioned that. I think it's not focused on enough, and it can be really lonely. It can be really isolating, and we have these aphorisms, that it takes a village and all of that stuff. But it's true. We really need support systems around us. In our immediate families with our partners, but also these extended. And I think there is some wisdom in the council of women that you surround yourself in times like this that just know, like, again, women know how to do this. They've done it for a long, long time. And I think sometimes it's missing, and it can just be lonely, and it can be hard, and it can be difficult. So that's a very, very good point that you raised there. So we've talked a lot about what women should do, what we should think about in terms of first foods and such. What would you say are the foods to have as like a hard avoid? What are some of the most detrimental foods, the things that we should almost certainly be steering away from that could cause adverse reactions in the gut, etc.?
I think sugar is one we really want to avoid. Sugar kills white blood cells, which is the main part of our immune system that helps us to fight infections. It also kills good gut bacteria. I don't think children need sugar at all. And worse than sugar is like high fructose corn syrup and processed foods. So I think, processed foods and sugar should be a very limited part of your child's diet in life. And in the first 1,000 days, they should have none of it. What else would I say to avoid? I mean, seed oils for sure. We don't want our babies to have seed oils. We don't want to mess up their metabolism and their healthy fat intake. Like our tissue, our cells are made up of a fatty lipid bilayer, and the integrity of that cell is going to be compromised when we give our baby seed oil. So definitely want to avoid those. Um, foods like spinach and strawberries that aren't organic, that is just like taking a big spoonful of antibiotics. And so I would definitely stay away from those as well. And the best way to do that is to talk to your farmer and ask if their produce is sprayed. It doesn't necessarily have to be USDA organic because that's an expensive certification. However, we do need to be really clear with our farmers and say, I'm not going to put that sprayed piece of produce in my mouth. So please be transparent with me if there is a spray, and they'll tell you. I mean, a lot of times, non-organic local food will be organically grown, and it's a really wonderful option, and it's a cheaper option, and it's that food has the same biological clock as you because it's grown around you. And so that's going to serve our body and our hormones even better. And it's affordable and it supports local agriculture. It's a closed loop system, right? So all of those things are really important. I guess my top three would be sugar to avoid, seed oils to avoid, and sprayed foods that are, on the dirty dozen. That would be major ones to avoid.
Yeah, and the
Yeah, I
seed.
mean, the list could go on.
Yeah, the seed oil thing is kind of baffling to me because of the fact that it's one of the primary ingredients in the formulas that you mentioned, and that's one of the kind of motivating factors for probably trying to get people off that pipeline as soon as possible and back to real food, because that's just it's crazy to me that that has become so normalized and so accepted, and that kind of we lay down and accept that, when in reality we could be setting up for all kinds of metabolic dysfunction, mitochondrial dysfunction down the line. Just to clarify, to make this as crystal clear as possible, when you say sugar, you're thinking of things like refined sugar and high fructose corn syrup, right? You're not steering away from good, clean vegetables, fruits, and easy to digest carbohydrates, well cooked and things like that. So it's more so just the processed forms of sugar and high fructose corn syrup you're looking at.
Exactly. When I say sugar, I mean cane sugar. And a little bit here and there for older children. Like I don't think it's a make or break situation if they have, that healthy foundation. But for babies, it's just, they don't need any sugar at all. And a little bit of honey, I think after the age, really for our baby, we gave him honey after 18 months. This next baby, all babies are different. Maybe she'll get it a little sooner. Um, honey, of course, is medicine. So you parents can decide when your baby gets honey.
What do you think about what do you think is going on? Some of the factors that are at play with childhood allergies and how that seems to be exponentially on the rise. I'm sure there's a lot here, but what do you think really stands out?
So I think that allergies are directly correlated with the health of our gut health and digestion. So our immune system is braided with our digestive system, basically. 80%, as far as we know, of the immune system lives inside of the gut. So when we have a leaky gut, that means that there's these things called tight junctions are essentially broken, and food can then go in and out of the bloodstream. And of course, the immune system is like, hey, I got to take care of this. And it flags it. And an allergy develops based on the immune system's response to a dysfunctional digestive system. So, in order to support immunity, we have to support digestion. And food allergies are relatively new. I mean, people are just reacting to all of this stuff because we have a damaged gut microbiome and a leaky gut. And once we clean up the environment, we heal and seal leaky gut. Healing and sealing is very important. Then we can reduce allergies or prevent them.
I think that's so fascinating that how so much of this stuff just comes back to gut health. And I'm curious, do you think, like we talked about the autoimmune issues, we've talked about the importance of the microbiome. How could this gut health issue be showing up in other ways for children or adults, like down the line? What other things might be indications that the gut is off?
Anxiety and depression, huge. Anything with the skin, obviously any digestive issues like constipation, IBS, those kind of Crohn's, that type of diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
behavioral stuff in children. So
Mm.
autism, not being able to concentrate, or ADD, all of those things are going to be related to the gut microbiome and digestion. Like, it's just such a foundational piece of our health. We can't go on ignoring what's, like literally the way our body works is we ingest nutrients, we absorb it, we assimilate them, and then that's how we are able to have defense mechanisms, detoxify, create neurotransmitters. All of that is so related to our gut health. So when it comes to something like an allergy to a food, I just don't understand how people think that we can solve it by, someone just sent me this like packet. It's like called Little Mix-Ins, and it's like you like sprinkle in the dehydrated form of this food, which is supposed to prevent the allergen. And I'm like, but that makes no sense. We can't circumvent what's actually going on with the physiology and try to like Band-Aid solution. The same thing with antibiotics, steroids, pharmaceuticals, like SSRIs, right? We really want to make the gut function so that it can produce the neurotransmitters that we need to feel good.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this Band-Aid over bullet wounds kind of culture that we've got is causing more problems than it's helping. It temporarily will solve one issue and then cause another issue down the road. I mean, you mentioned antibiotics. There's potentially a prime example there. I mean, in some instances, they are literally life-saving. But is there a case to be made that they are overused? And I'm sure you have a pretty deep understanding of just how bad antibiotics can be for the gut microbiome. My understanding is it's essentially nuclear warfare. It's wiping the good and the bad out in the case of killing the infection or whatever's going on. Is it safe to say that we want to avoid antibiotics unless absolutely necessary?
Correct. If it's going to save your life, of course,
right,
use that antibiotic. But this low dose chronic use of antibiotics, it's absolutely wreaking havoc on our digestion, our immune system, and our brain. We can't underestimate the pathway between the gut and the brain. Literally, microbes are traveling on our vagus nerve to our brain every single second, every single day. And not to mention, when our microbiome is damaged and our digestion isn't working, we have huge amounts of inflammation in the body. And so that's its own level of wreaking havoc on our system and making us feel really bad. Whininess and crankiness in our children, it's not always related to food or the gut microbiome, but a large percentage of it can be addressed by simply regulating their blood sugar, getting some good healthy microbes in them, and making sure that they are fed enough and throughout the day, right? Like, yes, they can't just rely on chips and feel good, or cookies or whatever.
Yeah.
It's not gonna.
And nutrified too, not just the energy, not just the calories, but the actual nutrition, like you said. And I think it's kind of crazy in hindsight when you zoom out and you think about how we want to pin the blame on rambunctious little boys, for example, in schools that can't sit still. So we medicate them, and you reverse engineer that a few steps, and you look at, were they hammering blue light, watching TV for hours before bed the night before? And then how did they start the day? Well, they started the day with a bowl of Cookie Crisp or a Pop-Tart and an orange juice. And then they get to school and they give them a muffin, which is refined flour, refined sugar, and seed oils for good measure. And then they want to blame the child for not being able to self-regulate. Yes, well, no joke, they can't self-regulate, right? They're living in a body that is kind of like they can't find comfort in their own skin. Their enteric nervous system is all off. The brain is inflamed. The body is inflamed. They're probably micronutrient deficient, even if they have an excess of energy on them. And it's just kind of crazy. It feels like we live in the upside down world in so many instances. So if the answer is these foods that can heal and seal the gut and potentially offsetting some damage from things like antibiotics, is the solution the opposite? Probiotics? Talk to me about the importance of pro and prebiotics and the distinction between those two things.
Yes. So probiotics are essentially, a lot of people might think probiotics and think about a bottle of a supplement, right? And that's certainly one way. However, we have to be really careful with the supplements that we choose to take, because these supplements often have fillers and others, they can even have like GMO particles in them that then become their own antibiotic along with the supplement. And also that filler, like that rice, whatever filler that's in there, can be food for the pathogens. So when it comes to supplementing with probiotics, I am very serious about helping people find clean, good, effective probiotics, which are helpful. But where the most bang for your buck is both economically and from a physiologic standpoint, is fermenting your own foods. This is what was done traditionally. This is what humans have relied on since agriculture, and even before that, because, you know, meat is hung and dried, and that is a fermentation process, right? Salt curing is its own type of fermentation. And so there are beneficial microbes that are carried through the food. When you ferment your own cabbage at home, you multiply that vitamin C by 10 times. The nutrients in that food itself become so much more bioavailable through the fermentation process, and you're getting inoculated with so much more probiotic microbes than you would from a supplement. So I am all about pro food for starting babies and also for adults and children. The way that you start a baby on a probiotic is you simply just do 1 drop of sauerkraut juice into their meat stock, and that has trillions of microbes for their gut. And after that, you can build up slowly. You want to build up slowly because these microbes, like you mentioned, that waging war with the antibiotic, the probiotic microbes do that too. So they're going to try to overtake and kill the bad bacteria, and that's going to happen in the form of a symptom. Usually it shows up like, you know, maybe a skin patch, something like eczema, or it will show up like a flu-like symptom. Die-off is real, and it really happens. And so that's why it's really important to take probiotics seriously and just go slow with them.
Yeah, very, very important. In somebody that might be listening to this who, you know, maybe feel like they're getting a late start, for example, because they didn't know any of this information, or people that are just getting into it and want to do good are gonna maybe encounter one of the bigger challenges of raising children, which is picky eating and getting them to eat the good stuff. And I think that, you know, you probably get asked about this a lot. So how do you approach the topic of picky eaters?
Yeah, well, picky eating is basically a microbiome symptom. Again, bringing back to the beginning of the conversation, we were talking about baby-led weaning and microbiome-led weaning. So if there's an imbalance of microbes, those microbes are going to be very fierce about their desires. And that can come up in stubbornness in your child, you know, demanding certain foods. Those microbes are addicted, which makes your child addicted to those foods. And so we need to change the microbiome. There's lots of ways to approach this, and it's going to be bio-individual based on your family system and how you all, you know, work together and approach food. But I absolutely think the entire family culture needs to shift. It can't just be, you know, oh, we have to fix this child and we have to, you know, change their ways. We have to change the whole family, and everyone's microbiome is going to be involved. So that's one note. The other thing is that we want to change the physical microbiome in their mouth. We want to change the physiology. So I say that like 1 drop is a success. So we do 1 drop of sauerkraut juice and maybe some lemonade sweetened with honey, right? That's just a great way to start bringing in those probiotic foods. We also want to do the same thing with meat stock, putting a little bit of meat stock. You know, if we're going at the slow and steady approach and that child eats grains, we want to cook those grains in meat stock, something like that. And then there's the cold turkey approach, where it's summertime, you have more time with your family, and you explain it to them why we're doing this. It's going to make you feel better. Right now, you have these bad bugs in your body that are craving foods or making you feel, you know, hurt your tummy, whatever language is already there and available for your family. And then we say, on this day, we're all starting the soup diet, and we're going to be silly and fun. We're going to celebrate soup, and you start the GAPS nutritional protocol, and you heal your body.
I love that. And I really like this emphasis on the family all being involved. And something you speak about, which I find quite fascinating, is the familial microbiome and how we're borrowing it from each other and lending it from each other, and dad and mom and siblings, and the house microbiome too. Take and do with that what you will in terms of how important it is to think about the microbiome that extends beyond just the person we're talking about, in this instance, often the child, and how it's familial and how it's in the home, and some of the important considerations you think about there.
Yeah, well, definitely you want to think about the toxins or lack of toxins that you bring into your house. So, you know, something like a Clorox bleach is going to impact your family's microbiome. So a lot of times, like in my course, the first thing we do is we look at the pantry and we look at the household cleaning supplies. What are we using that might be damaging our microbiome? There are lots of things that, you know, like let's say someone down the line is really having trouble healing. We're definitely going to want to check out mold. You know, there's lots of things that can be impacting our environment, and we are working internally to build the microbiome And beyond that, there are factors, of course, that are impacting us internally as well. So the more robust system we have inside, the better we can deal with the outside toxins. And I think our home, we just want to super emphasize like the good earth dirt, right? So good, healthy soil. Like we want to play in the dirt. We want to be in the sunshine. We want to build resilience in our systems through our healthy environment outside. And then when we come inside, we want to pay attention to things like polyester clothing. Like I said, the laundry detergent, the cleaning supplies, the synthetic chemicals, the beauty products, all of that is absolutely going to play a role in our microbiome health.
Yeah, it can seem like a lot, there's so many things that seem to be pinching little pennies from our health piggy bank every day when we think about the modern world, if you will, full of its chemicals and convenience. But I think the goal of conversations like this is to equip people with the knowledge so that they can make more informed decisions. And I think it usually looks like coming back to this ancestral lens, this ancestral wisdom, a slant more to the things that are available in nature that we can use. And the chemicals and the convenience usually aren't going to lend themselves to a healthy microbiome, a healthy household, etc. So it's just really holistically taking a viewpoint of this and looking at the many, many inputs, of which, there are a lot, but the more you know, the better you could do. And I think that's a very, very empowering lens to take. Just kind of look at it holistically and see which are the biggest needle movers for you and your family. One of the things I really wanted to talk to you about is raw milk and your take on whether raw milk is suitable for the mother during breastfeeding. Is it suitable to introduce to the child? If so, when? Or is raw milk, like we would hear from our 3-letter agencies, basically a walking death sentence if we even look at it?
Well, I personally love raw milk. It's very beneficial for us. Raw milk has a microbiome which is intact, right? Because it's not heated, not pasteurized. We're not losing the enzymes that are included in milk when it comes from the udder. And also, the healthiest food for a baby is mama's raw milk. So I think just from that perspective, it's like, okay, so there's definitely something to this. Now, from the GAPS perspective and a microbiome perspective, sometimes people can be really reactive to dairy. And this is typically, this is a common thing people say, the how, not the cow. Right? How's the cow raised? How's the dairy commercialized and treated? And its long line of processing, before you buy it from the grocery store and it ends up in your mouth. So sometimes the people that I work with who are sensitive, they need to take a total break from dairy, 6 weeks typically, to remove all of the commercial residue of dairy from their systems. Then we start, during that 6 weeks, we're also building the gut. We're using meat stock. We're using fermented foods to help re-inoculate the gut microbiome and support the overall health, bring down inflammation. Then we slowly start adding dairy back in, starting with ghee. Ghee is very high fat and the milk solids are cooked out of it. And so it's usually one that people can start with. Once ghee becomes a very healthy food for you and you don't have any inflammatory responses from it, then you move on to butter. Then you move on to a homemade 24-hour fermented yogurt. And the fermentation process actually removes the lactose. It brews out the milk sugar, which can also be fodder for pathogenic overgrowth. We give the 24-hour fermented yogurt or whey from that yogurt, and that provides our body with beautiful fat-soluble vitamins. It gives us the beneficial bacteria. There's plenty of enzymes that are still intact because we've ideally started from raw milk. And we have another step on our dairy introduction protocol that you have then completed, and you move on to kefir. And kefir is like the gold standard probiotic. I always suggest making it at home yourself from raw milk to start. It can be from any animal. And kefir contains 60 to 70 beneficial strains of yeast and bacteria. And that yeast part is really important because remember, throughout this conversation, I've mentioned how yeast can cause the sugar cravings. Yeast can cause the whiny and cranky behaviors. Yeast is a big deal, and every modern person has yeast. Every modern person in touch with the Western world or Western things that we get ourselves into trouble with, like sugar and processed food and alcohol and pharmaceuticals, all those. Yeast is a protector, actually. So yeast is going to help buffer toxicity. Yeast and parasites, it buffers toxicity. So when we start bringing in beneficial strains of yeast from our homemade milk kefir, we are going to kill off the pathogenic yeast, or really a better way of saying it is just to bring balance to the whole system. So raw milk itself, I consider a very advanced food. And what I mean by that is if you're a healthy, robust person with no digestive or immune symptoms, you are likely going to thrive on raw milk. However, if you are coming to this podcast or you're coming to one of my courses and you are already sick, you're not typically going to start just on raw milk, right? We're going to move through that dairy introduction protocol, do some gut healing, and really support your microbiome before you graduate to raw milk. So the question of breastfeeding moms, should they have raw milk? I am a huge advocate for raw milk products. It just depends on where you are in your healing journey, how you're going to be able to digest that food. And I think that that's like the most practical approach that I can take with dairy, because I mean, we buy 4 gallons of raw milk a week. We love raw milk. I'm a huge advocate for it, but just by, blankly saying that everyone should be able to digest and have raw milk, that's just not the state of humans right now in the world. We're not that healthy, to be honest.
I love the nuance in that answer. I also love that you're the first person I've met that drinks more raw milk than our family. We get 3.5 gallons a week. So you got us by half a gallon. So now I'm feeling like a challenge has been thrown down, and I'm going to add another half gallon, and we're going to come back and we'll have a milk chug off. But no, really, seriously, appreciate the nuance there and this emphasis on healing, sealing, rehabilitating, and then ultimately getting to the point of reintroduction of foods that are healthy when you are healthy. But along that, there's a couple of light bulbs were going off as you mentioned a few words like parasites and overgrowths, and then, SIBO and candida. And what often comes when those conversations enter the room is like the cleanse culture, right? Do we cleanse? Do we like kill all of this stuff? Where are you at with the whole like obsession with cleansing, whether it's just juice cleanses or whether it's, trying to kill off parasites? And these things seem to have like waves of how sexy they get on social media. And it seems like they're having a big moment right now in terms of cleanse everything, kill everything. Do you just try and take a more balanced approach of rehabilitation with food, or do you believe there's a time and a place sometimes for some of that stuff?
Yeah, I literally have chills because I agree. Like, it's so popular and so many people, they want that thing that's going to like move the needle. And I think that also comes from the culture of we can take something and that's going to solve our problems. And that cleanse really fits the bill of that. It's like, oh, I can cleanse my body and then I'll feel better. And like, it's so common for women, like, oh, we need to cleanse. We need to do this crash diet. We need to get the diet culture. What you need to do to help your body naturally release parasites and toxins that you don't need is to build. We need to build our body. We don't need to cleanse our bodies. That's what I say, or actually building does cleanse our bodies. That's what I always say for babies. So it's such a good teacher. That's why I think I've really like sunk my teeth into this starting solids thing, because it is such a good teacher for showing us how our bodies work and our bodies heal. Babies who start on building foods will naturally start to release the toxins because their body feels safe enough to let go. We cannot let go of any sort of toxicity if we don't have the nutrients to rebuild those structures, right? So when it comes to something like eczema, once a mom starts feeding just plain meat stock, no vegetables, it's meat stock and sea salt, created into this beautiful collagenous broth, that is giving the body nutrients to build the gut and to build the skin. Both epithelial cells are made from the same building blocks. So that is in our gut and on our skin. And when we provide the body with the foundational pieces to create new cells, guess what? Toxins can start to leave the system as they need to. Our organs are designed to detoxify, but they cannot work without nutrients. So your first step, if you get the urge to cleanse or you feel like your body needs to release something, is to build. And those animal foods are the answer. That is the key to helping your body heal itself.
Wonderful. Yeah, I love that take. It feels very aligned with my understanding of it too. This idea, again, it's like just a different lens to look at it, more of a lens of abundance and building and nutrifying and resiliency, as opposed to like just constantly killing or restricting or deficit driven. And I think that's usually the path towards health, and I think I really resonate with that, and I hope our audience does too. So to kind of bring this one home, I want to jump ship for a second into more of the lifestyle practices, if you will. We've talked a lot about food and the importance, but you started the conversation saying, this round of motherhood has been really beneficial from so much of what you learned the first go around to this round, grounded nervous system, regulated nervous system. So would you mind sharing with us some of the things that you're doing aside from food that really help you do that, and some of the things that you think are somewhat like less talked about, I guess, in terms of regulating the nervous system, rest and recover, things that you do, habits, routines, etc., that really help you thrive holistically.
Yes. So I have a beautiful backyard, and every day I go out right first thing in my backyard. I nurse my baby. Sometimes I fall asleep out there because sometimes it's 6 a.m., sometimes it's 8:30. It just really varies with the babe. But that makes me feel really good. And I also want to get my feet in the grass. I know these are more popular now, which is great because people are really starting to key into, what else can really help me. But it's like the simpler, the better. So I find like, I really want to play with my toddler, like I really want to like look at his eyes and hug him and hold him and be close with him. And that's going to be a really regulating thing for my nervous system.
Yeah.
The social nervous system developed because of the connection between a mother's eyes and her baby while she's breastfeeding. So something super simple that I try very hard not to do is scroll while I'm nursing. And I nurse a lot. And I have an online business, so it's like that phone, it's so easy to have that phone in my hand while I'm nursing my baby. But that social nervous system connection is so important. And with my son, my business was in a different place. But 2 years ago when I had my son, I didn't get on social media for 6 months. I didn't post. I didn't do anything. This time around, I hired someone to do my socials, and I didn't get on at all either because I just didn't want that hook.
Yeah.
I didn't want that other latch. I wanted to stay right here with my baby. And I needed to give myself a hard boundary to, get off that addictive device. Right. So I'm starting to come back on social media. I'm back on social now. I'm posting myself, but that was extremely important. That was an extremely important boundary for me to implement. And I think that having that time with my baby and just so hooked into her, into our healing, into our birth, and like there's this cozy, sweet time is what imprints. It's almost like how I could start anew. I can have like I can use the postpartum to like become a new woman. And not that I have to let all the old pieces float away, right? But it's like that level of healing, it's like generational healing. Because my mom didn't take a postpartum, my grandmother didn't take a postpartum. But now I'm like reclaiming this time as a way to train my nervous system responses, right? Like I can not, I can train so much into my system by just the simple input of rest and relaxation with my baby for 6 weeks. It's like I have the rest of my life to run crazy like a chicken with my head cut off. But hey, if I teach myself something here and I really stick to the practice, I might not even ever be that person again, which is pretty cool, I think.
It's very cool. It's really powerful and very empowering. And I think, in a culture of just rushing and doing more, and you see it all the time, even on social media, probably well-intentioned people, but they're like, oh, I'm back in the gym, I gave birth a week ago. It's like, calm down, slow down. You're never going to get these moments back. You have the rest of your life to get back to your business and back to these things. And I understand there's logistical problems there that need to be solved, but these moments are so precious. These are the golden years. These are the moments you're going to look back on 20 years from now and want to give anything you could to go back to those. So the only thing that we can do is try to embody and enjoy them and be as present as possible. And I think that's just a really profound way of kind of keeping that forefront of mind when we are in a culture that has a tendency to just think about, the next thing and the next growth and whatever else it is. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, thank you. It's been just, I feel so lucky. It's so good.
Yeah, thank you. I think, like I said, we've been a huge fan of your protocols, and my wife has been consuming the course and consuming a lot. So thank you for helping us to help our family get healthier. And I think it's really, it's really empowering. It's really important. And you can just really feel good about what you're doing in terms of setting your child up for the most success. We are entering into a challenging world and potentially a challenging time. And there's a lot of stuff that's going to be hard to thrive as a healthy human in this world. So giving them the best possible start that we can is us doing our best. And I owe you a debt of gratitude personally for helping us do that and exposing this information. I think it's really valuable. So please tell people where they can go to keep up with you and follow more of this and potentially look at your courses and offerings.
Yeah, so I am the Wild Nutritionist on Instagram at Wild Nutritionist, and my website is regenerativeCookingSchool.com. And so I teach you how to cook the foods that will help your babies heal and it is just such an honor to come on this podcast and to hear from you. I'm so excited that we got to do this. So thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Go check out Kate, the Wild Nutritionist. Let's all get our meat stock on. Let's heal. Let's get those guts thriving, and let's stay radical. Thank you, Kate. We'll see all of you beautiful humans next week. Peace out. All right, friends, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Radical Health Radio. We got a fresh new podcast for you every Wednesday. If you enjoyed the show, consider liking, subscribing, reviewing, and rating us on your podcast platform. It helps us spread this message of radical health. We'll see you next week.